Emergency fund. What is this? How big should it be? What's it useful for? I'm going to cover all that today, and be sure to stay for the end of the video where I tell you exactly what I do with my own emergency fund. Now, an emergency fund is a set of money that you have available ready in case of emergencies. Now, what could these be? It could be useful for if you have to replace something unexpected. So in your house, like a furnace, or your refrigerator goes out, or you have a car accident, or you need car repairs. It costs thousands of dollars, and you need access to that money. But I think more important is actually around your job. Having a job loss or not being able to work for a period of time due to illness or due to disability, you want to have some funds, some money ready and available in case of these unexpected emergencies that can crop up because life happens. Now, how big should this emergency fund be? The typical range that people say is somewhere between 2 to 6 months of expenses. And again, that really gets around this whole idea of a job, okay? A job loss. If you unexpectedly lose your job or can't work for a period of time, you still have ongoing expenses that you need to cover while you're trying to find another job or find other income. So that's where this kind of 2 to 6 months. Now, what can be factors in how big to make this fund are things like how safe you feel your job is. You work in an industry that has lots of employment opportunities, you've been at your job for a long time, so then your fund, your emergency fund, you might not need quite as much. You feel very safe. What if your salary varies a lot? You work in commissions, or you're an independent freelancer, own your own business, then you might want a little bit more of a buffer. Again, if you're a dual income family, maybe you need less of a buffer since you have 2 incomes and you can be more flexible. So those are some of the things you want to look at in terms of how big to make this fund, but it really kind of goes off of monthly expenses, and typically you want to look maybe 2 to 6 months. Some people might have less than that, feel very safe. Some people might want a lot more, because another factor you might want to look at is what I call the sleep at night factor. How well do you sleep at night? Are you up late at night thinking about unexpected emergencies, and do you have a buffer to handle those things? Well, if it's keeping you up, maybe you need a little bit more of a longer, more months worth of expenses ready to go. But just be aware that the more money you have saved for these emergencies, the less you're putting towards your longer term goals, retirement or other longer term spending. Which leads me to the next point of where is this money? So you said, oh, I need 3 months worth of expenses, multiple thousands of dollars ready to go. What do I do with it? Well, you want this money to be easily accessible, quickly accessible, and not lose any value. Okay, you don't want to have to use this money and then look around and say, oh my gosh, it's lost some value. I don't have as much as I thought. So those would be accounts such as checking or savings accounts or money market accounts, maybe even very short-term CDs, certificate of deposits in a bank. All of those will keep your money available, easily accessible, and just ready to go and not lose any value. You don't want to look at necessarily stocks and bonds, because as we know, those things can go down in value, can be quite substantially down in value. So when you turn around and you have that unexpected emergency, you might not have as much money there as you thought. Now, there are a couple other complex strategies. You can look at home equity lines of credit. That's borrowing debt or credit card debt. You don't want to use those too much. The home equity might not be a bad percentage-wise. Credit cards are certainly super high. And so you don't want to be going into a lot of debt when you don't have a job or something unexpected comes around. You can also look at laddering techniques, bond or CD laddering, which gets you a little bit higher yield on the money, means you make a little bit more on that money rather than just sitting in a savings account. But again, they're a little more complex and require more maintenance. Now, what if you say, okay, I need 3 months of emergency saving, and that's quite a lot, and I haven't gotten started, or it just seems overwhelming. Well, listen, the most important thing to do is just get started today. All right, make sure that you're just getting started with whatever you can save, $100 a month, couple $100 a month. Open the account today, your new savings account for this emergency, or a money market account for this emergency fund. Set up automatic transfers to go in there every month and just get started. Pretty soon, in 6 months, 12 months, you'll start building up that emergency fund, and you'll be well on your way to getting your fund in place that will then be in place for you for quite a long time. which leads me to the next point, which is to make sure you reevaluate your fund. Maybe the fund you decided in your 20s or 30s is no longer adequate enough when you get to your 40s or 50s. And so periodically you want to reevaluate where the fund is, how much you've got in that fund, and things like that. Now, what do I do personally for an emergency fund? I have not built up a fund in a savings account just like I told you to do. Instead, we have very stable jobs in my family, and we have excellent credit, and so I have a home equity line of credit ready to go. And since I'm very risk tolerant as well, I've also built up longer term savings goals, retirement accounts, in a taxable brokerage account. And I have access to that within just a few days' time, so it's easily accessible. And I prefer to keep all my money fully invested across a portfolio of stocks and bonds so that I can earn more over the long term. Now, if I do have an emergency, which I've had small ones in the past where I've had to get some money quickly, I might have to sell things at a loss. So sell some stocks or bonds and take a loss, which can be quite substantial. If you invest, a couple $1,000s today in stocks, it can go down 50% tomorrow, okay? It can really go down that much, so you have to be careful. But I've built up a large enough reserve, and I'm risk tolerant enough that if I need to take money out of that, and even if it goes at a loss, I feel here at mid-career with a stable family environment that we'll be able to build those assets back up. And I prefer to have my funds fully invested at all times. Now, this is not an option for everybody, but it's definitely an option. Consider all the things that I've talked about in this video from start to finish, and align your own risk tolerance with your family situation and see where you might end up. And working with a financial advisor is definitely recommended if you're going to use any of the more complex strategies or really deviate from that 2 to 6 months worth of savings in a savings account. The most important thing to do is really think through your situation and come up with these what-if scenarios that can be pretty bad, and make sure that you're going to be covered, because life definitely happens. So do you have emergency funds? Is it fully covered? Do you feel really safe and sleep well at night? Or are you on the fence and not sure you have enough? Definitely leave me a comment, reach out to me. I love to hear from you guys. Have an awesome day.